yet?
Ma'am, it's going on right now.
Oh, that's a pity. Okay. So obviously taking out time for this meeting has not been easy for you all. I appreciate it. Thank you. It's also our last meeting, so let's make it really special. There's nothing we have to do today. We literally are just going to have these two guest speakers, authors introduce themselves, talk about what they feel about your stories. But more critically, I really want you all to be able to ask them questions. Why writing? Why is it important? How does it help? What about academics and writing? Both of them are absolutely, brilliantly studied in journalism and literature. So go all out with your questions. That's a lot more important. So definitely, yes. Who's talking? Yes, Nirvan?
Ma'am, I won't be able to speak much today because I have a sore throat. Is it okay if I type some stuff in the chat?
100%. Ninad, I will be on the lookout, but in case there's a question that I miss out of Nirvan's, you make sure you read it.
Sure.
Perfect. Nirvan, you will have to speak when they address you directly. But beyond that, you just have to kind of, go on to it. We'll also have a guest student who's actually also my nephew, Devansh, who's read your stories, who also has his exams on. And he's going to choose his top 2 favorite stories and why. So that's interesting to see another grade 8 student connect with your stories. And after this, yes, we'll come to an end. What I will request all of you, Evie and Z not here, try and make a small 40-second video testimonial, if possible, for me. What did you like about the book club? Why did you enjoy it? What did you look forward to? Any of those things. If there was something you all didn't like much also, you all can say that as well. I'll accept that. But it's just got to be a short video. Where is Zahan, Ninad? Any idea? Because it's 3:55.
Let me just call him right away and check, ma'am.
And then I'll message Arti that we're ready for her. How did the exams go so far, Ara?
Ma'am, they're going good.
How many over?
Ma'am, so we've done 3 exams, right?
Okay.
No,
got
4.
it.
Okay, 4.
So what, another 4 to go?
2 more, yeah.
2 more? That's not bad at all. What about you, Vivan? Your exams are still on too?
Yes, ma'am, we're in the same class. So
Ma'am, we have the exams on the same days, like the same time.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nirvan. I'm going to miss calling you all AV, A, V, and Z. It was fun. Okay, I think I see Z here as well. Awesome.
Hello.
Hey, hi Z, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Awesome. So like I said, it is our last meeting today. The book club's to an end. Enjoy asking and interacting with both these incredible guest speakers we have here. So keep your questions ready. Arti is going to be with us for 45 minutes. So she's going to give you a succinct on, have you all read her comments already?
Yeah.
Awesome. Keep that open because she's obviously going to address it from there. So we'll keep it there. And
ma'am, could you just give me a second to switch on my camera, please?
Yes, darling. And also, Z, I've already told these kids, we're hoping you'll be able to make us a 40-second testimonial about whatever you liked about the book club, what you enjoyed, what you did,
Okay. Yeah,
anything.
sure.
40 seconds, not more, please.
So when would you like it by? The end of the...
Whenever you all want. You all can even, take time to finish your exams and do it over the weekend. That's fine. I respect the exams a lot more. So don't stress about that. Okay. Ninad, is Arti there?
No, ma'am, not yet. She's not in the waiting room yet.
Got it. So you want to message her or should I message her?
I'll message her, ma'am. Right away.
Okay.
Ma'am, could I just go get some water and all just before our
Yes, please. Please don't get up after that. So get
Yeah.
your water breaks, loo breaks, all sorted out.
Ma'am, she is in the waiting room.
Okay, get her in.
Okay.
Kids, please have your videos on. Arav, Zahan.
Hi,
Hi, Arti. So nice to see you again.
thank you. Same here. I've been excited about this
Oh
since
my gosh, I am so excited. The children are so excited. Unfortunately, the mentors, the student mentors to our children couldn't come. They all have their IB grade 12 exams, and the poor kids are havocked and wrecked by all the excessive pressure. But hey, we at least have all the 4 important kids here. Z, can you have your video on? So, Arti, I call them AV and Z because their names are way too long. But we have Arav, Vivan, Nirvan, and Zahan here. And to be honest, these children for the last 3 months have probably taken a lot of the toll from me, where I've over excruciated them about English and summaries and overviews and books which are not easy. First, I gave them a Japanese translation, then I gave them the old school, which I told you what it is and how tough it is. So, having you as a children's author is such a nice joy in their life. So, children, you all already know about Arti. I sent you all her write-up, but what's exciting for me is that I actually literally met her once. And that too, when I was actually talking to her about me being a counselor. And then she told me about her writing books. And I said, oh, I'm going to ask you to help me. And I don't think the poor lady realized how quickly I'm going to ask her to help me. But on that happy note, Arti, I promise you the chocolates that you love so much. But I have picked up your Hungry series. I've started reading it and must say it is so beautiful. There is just so much to connect with it. So I'm really excited. I hope these children soon get to pick up their books as well and read it. They've also got their exams on now. But I'm not going to take too much time. I know you've just got 45 minutes and I want the children to be able to speak with you. So without much ado, they've been sent the stories and the edits you've sent. So you can choose to pick up on any one of the children and start with their work.
Okay, hi all of you, Nirvan, Zahan, Arav, and Ivan. I really liked your stories. Let me begin on that note. And you guys have done a great job. Grade 8, right, all of you?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Yes. So, I mean, according to grade 8 standards, you are all have written very well. Excellent. Of course, as an author, I get little, I tended to see so much. I hope you all didn't mind. I made so many. I mean, I wanted to make more corrections, but I just gave just a slight overview over what I felt. Was it too overwhelming to see so many red marks on your stories? Any one of you can speak up, I guess.
I don't think any of you all need to be mute. This is a very small interactive session.
Yeah. Right.
No, I think it was really helpful. It pointed out my mistakes, so I could improve.
Yeah, it pointed out what we done wrong and what we can improve on. So
I agree with Arav and Zahan. It definitely lets you know what to improve on in your writing in the next story.
Right. Okay. So whose story should we begin with? Arav Jain. Can you see me? I don't know how to, I'm just opening that story. Arav Jain. Which one is it? Wait. Holiday story. You want to talk about that one? Or you're giving 2 stories, no? Honor code. Which
Yes.
one you want to talk about?
Ma'am, any which one which you would like.
Which you like better, actually.
I like my honor code story better.
Okay, sure. So I'll just open that one.
Ma'am, I think you're muted.
I'm muted.
No, not you. Priyanka.
Yeah, I am glad you chose his honor code story. I kind of like that one.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's talk about this one. Renegade, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, So you begin very nicely. I like the way you've begun. A gang of four grievous thieves. I've even mentioned that you use, you know what's alliteration, do you? Anand?
Yes.
Okay, alliteration. Let me get this small screened. Okay, there you go. So it says a gang of four grievous thieves. Okay, that's very nice. You know, G again. And the same line you use strangers stealing. Right? So that's very, very nice. It's very interesting. So I really like the way most of you have used this alliteration, you know, in your stories. That just shows that, and if you make it more conscious, you make it 3-4 words together, it just gets the reader hooked. You know, a good reader will recognize that your grammar skills are strong. When you have these words together, when your grammar is better, when your choice of words is better. Okay, so let's now let me get down to this further. So I've mentioned that you've already used the word hustle and bustle. You know, bustle is a very common word again, hustle, bustle, right?
Okay.
So I guess we can just cut off the bustle, okay? Okay, so one thing that I was in most of your stories, that transition is missing. Do you mean, you know what is meaning by transition?
Yes.
Could you elaborate for me?
So like words like conjunctions and like moreover, however, similarly, words like that.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. But that is connection from one paragraph to the other, right? Transition means like how your story transits from one idea to the other.
Okay.
Suppose I'm talking like Arti is a girl. She studies in grade 12. Okay. She's in Hyderabad. I'm giving her introduction, right? Okay. And then I say that, then suddenly I jump off and I say like Arti died. Or, you know, like, you know, or I talk about another idea completely. You know, I suddenly
Okay.
talk about Arav. I have
Mhm.
to connect Arti and Arav first. Okay, so that's transition. So which I see is missing in everyone's story. It's not only yours. And jumping from one idea to another is there. Okay, like suppose I've made notes on your stuff. It says suddenly you're talking about the apartment, and then suddenly you reach gunpoint. Right? I think that everyone was in the apartment, and then suddenly the alarm bells or something rang. Is that story, right? The police came and all that, and suddenly they were in gunpoint. So the story has to build up. Okay, are you getting my point?
Yes.
How can you tell me a name of a movie which I can which you watched recently? Then we can.
I watched the new Fast and Furious movie.
No, I haven't watched that one.
Maybe choose a book.
Yeah,
It'll be easier.
a book would be better.
Recently, I read the book Holes by Louis Sachar.
Okay, great. That's a lovely book you've chosen to read. Okay, so they don't jump straight into the dungeon part, do they? No,
No.
right? The story builds up slowly. They tell us about what happened, how did he reach that there, you know, and then how strict the teacher was, and on how dirty the rooms were. And then slowly, it builds up. Okay. So that building up of the story is missing.
Okay.
Okay. What I have written as your comments is you have to add layers to your story to give the reader an overview. Okay, then you mentioned in the story, Carlos lived in a cell. Okay, and now in the same paragraph, you tell us about Carlos living in a cell and befriending his roommate. But there was emotion missing in that. I felt if I was Carlos, I would have felt sad. I would have mentioned I'm unhappy. I would have mentioned, you know, that I was feeling sick from inside. What had I done? My conscience wasn't allowing me to do this. Why did I put myself into this? And then slowly, then his roommate and him start talking. And then you have to build that friendship. By saying one word, that his roommate and he befriended each other. So you missed out to so much of layering. Are you getting my
Okay.
point?
Yeah. So I need to add the emotions and like
Yes.
conversation between
Yes,
them,
yes,
and
yes.
then reach to the point that they become friends.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
But overall, it was very good description, very vivid. Rather, I would say in everyone's writing, all four of you, I like the way people are describing things, using such nice words. And like someone had a story of snow. Which one? Who was it? Someone in the snow and those giants, forest giants.
That was me again.
That was you again. Okay. Okay. So again, I like the way the story, your idea was very good. Okay. Firstly, because you were talking about the environment. The main aim was that, right? Okay. So that was really good. And again, the way you described the snow, you in 3 paragraphs you used to describe the snow. That was really nice. But I would say first you need to target who's going to read your story. That's the most important thing. Okay. Anyone who writes a story, a book, first you need to understand which age group am I looking at? Right? Have you thought about that? No.
No.
So that's one of the most important things. So then according to that, you use the choice of words. Suppose usually my books are from that age group from 7 to 12. Okay. So if I am aiming at that age group, that means that's a chapter book. Okay. Then comes young adult fiction after that. Okay. So then I can go easy. I can mix, I can jump from one idea to the other. But if I'm targeting to 7 to 12, I have to be very specific. Okay. My first line within my first page of my book, I have to introduce my character, my main character. Otherwise, the child is going to get lost. He wouldn't know what is she talking about. It's going to be like that. Okay. And I have to mention the want of the kid. Like in my latest book, I'll show you. This is my new book. It's just got released. Okay. It's called Read, Write, Race. Okay.
Okay.
So within the first page or within the second page, you will know immediately that my character Raghav wants to do something and whatever it is. And that will be his aim. Okay. And he has to reach that by the end of the story. How is he going to reach that? Like this.
Okay.
Okay? He cannot reach it like that. Got
Okay.
it?
Yeah.
Okay, now can you ask me questions of if I've written something you didn't like or you're doubtful?
So this is obviously like an action story.
Mhm.
This story I've made.
Mhm.
So like the idea, is this idea innovative? Is this creative? Or would this be too much from a movie, too inspired?
See, that's okay. I will say, you know what, when we begin as writers, in the first thing when I started writing, and I had attended this workshop from Robert McKee, and I learned that most of us, any writer in the world, will first write what's on the top of their head. Okay, so you
Okay.
like movies, I'm sure. So you've just written your version of that story. This is just your trials. So that's okay. So when I started writing, I would write about Enid Blyton kind of stories, because I was so fond of Enid Blyton, that kind of stories. So then you slowly start discovering your style, which will come to you. I'm sure Priyanka is going to help you with that within time. Then you will recognize. But for that, how you recognize your style of writing, like you said, action. So if you like action, how will your writing get better? By only reading.
Okay, yeah.
Reading and writing both go hand in hand. They cannot be separated. The more you read, the better writer you're going to become. Okay. So if you like action, so tell me an action book which you've read or something. Action story.
Action stories like science fiction.
Okay. Suppose you're reading a science fiction book. How would you now? You got to start thinking like, how do I read like a writer? Okay. There are two ways we read. Usually when I read a book, I first just read and I gulp. I can't control myself. Like, how you eat chocolate. Gulp.
Yeah.
That. It's like that. Matlab, till 4 in the morning, I'll be reading just because the book has taken, my sleep and everything. I love the book so much. Okay. So I eat as if I'm gulping it down. So that's like reading like any other odd person is reading. Okay. But when you read like a writer, now the second time when I read the book, now I'll notice the alliterations, I'll notice the plot, I'll see how the author has started off with the book. Like, wow, this is so nice. Look at the way the grammar is used.
You have to analyze the book, the character build-up,
Yes.
the emotions he's displayed, the
Yeah.
description.
But first, read the book for fun. Because ultimately, writing and reading are both fun,
Mhm.
It can't be danda leke, types wala. It has to come from within. It has to be you. Okay. So read action books and see what you like. There'll be something that you love about that. Maybe the character.
Okay.
So I'll say I liked ABCD. Okay, in that character. But what did I like about that character? What is it? Did I like his styling? Did I like the way he gunned down all the men? Did I like the way he put himself into everything? What was that I liked? And that is you then. Then you start working from there. And that becomes your stories then.
So you take inspiration from the books you read, from like the topics you like to read.
Yes, maybe, suppose I'm reading a book, as you said, Louis Sacho, there's a lovely book, The Boy. I'm not getting, it's the same author. Are we all frozen?
You've been frozen, Arti.
Oh, I can see everyone is frozen. Okay, now better, right. Another book, The Boy, something, I'm missing the name. So I love that book, So what do I like in that book? I like emotions in that book. Okay. So I pick up emotion. That's me. Okay. So when I'm reading something, I know, okay, this is me. So it can be an inspiration, the emotional quotient, it could be, or it could be just the way the character is made. I'm not copying. I'm not plagiarizing. Okay. I'm just taking an inspiration. And inspiration can be anything under the sun. Okay. Like you're writing an action story. Every action story will have a villain.
Yeah.
Every action story will have a gun. Every action story will have a fight. Right? So you're not copying. But how well you are going to say it is your story. Have I even been able to convey everything?
Yes, ma'am. That was really
I
informative.
definitely think so, Arti. And a couple of the questions I will ask you after each of the children. And I think it's really important because I work with applications and essays. And one of the biggest takeaway I tell my children is transition. In a 650 words, if your transition gets lost, your essay is defeated.
Yeah.
But another very important thing I always say, and the admissions officers tell us this, is we want to be able to take those 2 words back home. So the kid becomes the currency kid or the juggling kid. So I'll ask you that when you read Arav's story, what were the 2 words that you take back home about the story?
Okay, I think
2, 3.
I've mentioned it on his thing that, which one is it? This one? Okay.
You can just randomly pick any of the stories and tell me those 2, 3 words you take back home with you on Arav's story.
So in the doc with the remarks which has been sent, I can only see like a few grammatical mistakes. Is there like a review or something at the end?
Yeah, what I've done is I've just given you a vague idea. I didn't go to the nitty-gritty. I didn't want to correct every word.
Obviously.
Okay? Yeah. So I just give you a vague idea. Grammatical mistakes, don't bother about grammar right now.
So I haven't received anything like that.
No. You didn't.
Okay. Arav, I think you will need to go into your review and see all the review or something like that, or you're using another laptop or something.
MS Word, it'll come on Word.
Are you using a Mac, Arav?
No, I'm using Dell.
Okay, we'll figure that one later. We'll see if Ninad can pull it up again for you. So perfect. So Thank you, Arav, for that and your questions. Arti, you want to move on to the next?
Okay. Who's waiting? Who's keen? Let me get this one. Okay, I have one from Vivan. Two from Vivan or one? One, I guess. Okay, should be two Vivan. Honor code, Vivan?
Yes, please.
Okay, let me see which one is it. Okay, yes, the entrepreneur one, right?
Yes, ma'am.
It's this one, right? Okay, great. Let me just close this smaller and get this here. Who's Vivan?
So before we move on to Vivan, Arti, I really want to introduce you to my, I have known this little girl, Sanjana. Sanjana, your face, please. Since she was 3 years old, I have seen her through her skating and her baking and her talking and her stories. Today, she's doing her master's at University of Texas, Austin in fiction, literature, poetry,
Wow.
and the girl is straight after my heart. And obviously, here are two authors who need to meet first. Sanjana Arti also has, if you remember, she's from Oxford. She's done some incredible programs, written some gorgeous stories. So she's finished Arav's essence of story, but she's moving on. Sorry, I didn't realize you were in the waiting room. But Arti, before anything for me, Sanjana is a student. And yeah, before anything, I think Arti, you'll always be a parent for me. So Sanjana, you want to quickly talk a little about yourself and then we can move on to the next kid.
Yeah, hi. It's so nice to meet you. I'm excited to talk about everyone's stories and to hear what Arti has to say. Like Priyanka Auntie said, I'm an MFA student at UT Austin, so I write stories as part of my classwork, which is the most amazing thing. And I had so much fun reading all of your stories. I did creative writing in my undergrad as well as anthropology. And so I'm always looking for ways to allow other disciplines to influence my writing and to allow my writing to influence everything else I do. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjana. Arti, sorry, won't take more time. You can move on to Vivan.
Okay. Okay. So Vivan, I really like your story of Soumya, right? About
Yes.
her, her company and how she drops, she chooses to, take the, what does she do? Wait, stealing information, right? Right. That was the one. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Okay. The story is really nice, rather, I would say. I mean, the way you put it up in the sense that, she's having a financial crunch in the company. That's really nice. And that's one thing. When you have a financial crunch, usually you push yourself to an extent which even you don't know, like cheating or stealing, So that base of the story is very good. That, and I like the way you've related it so well, that when she was in college, when she had said that, no, I'm never going to cheat. And, I'm always going to, and she gave lectures in colleges that, honor code is to be maintained. And when you don't maintain that in practice, so it's beautiful how her conscience is killing her about that. I mean, to get that at this age is really nice. Really, really good, So I really like that part in the story to understand. And in grade 8, I think it's wonderful to understand this part very well written. So the only thing what I think in your story is, okay, the paragraphs are missing. Okay. I think you've conveyed it like one long thing, but again, I'll get back to what I said to Arav. First, we need to recognize what age group you're writing this for. Okay. First, most important, who is my target audience? So, and everyone likes smaller paragraphs, of course, not the big, thicker novels, but if you're aiming this at a younger generation, then I think smaller paragraphs is always better. They easily connect and the story moves on in a flow. So this is the thing with both your stories, I guess. You've written it one long thing, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Ma'am, in my story, I had put in chapters as well as paragraphs. I don't know if those are missing or not.
No, they are there. I'm talking to Vivan, right?
Ma'am, you said my story as well.
No. She's talking about Vivan now, Arav.
Yeah, yours had chapters. I saw that. Yeah. Vivan has written one long thing, like, without any paragraphs. So I think that needs to work, you need to just work on that. And okay, again, one idea in one paragraph. Okay. So too many ideas were conveyed together. That is one thing we just a little balance would manage with that. Just a little orientation here and there. And then I think that should follow. If you put yourself into paragraphs, if you put your story into paragraphs, I think it will set well. So you'll know that, okay, this idea I'm dealing with here, let me finish it here. Then we go to the next one. Because these are very short stories. They're not long 5,000 word stories that we can go on and on and on lingering on about. Okay. So I think it'd be a good idea to convey one idea in one paragraph and move to the next one. Okay. So this is all for Vivan.
Arti, what did you feel about the end of the story?
Let me just get to it. 1 second. What is it? I really liked it. And I also like the way he's starting. The worst day of the week is not Monday. I like that part, where he's written that part. And especially this line where he says, the worst day of the week is not a Sunday or a Monday, but it's the day you let go of your core values. So I think I've even mentioned it, very well written, So I think Vivan, overall, a very good story again, but just little orientation and splitting up your ideas into paragraphs. Another thing I will say for all of you, it's not particularly for Vivan. He hasn't used too many words, but one or two stories does have. Don't try to use beautiful words. Okay? Use natural words. Because beautiful words don't beautify the story. They just beautify the word. That's it. So
I'm going to borrow that line from you, Arti.
So I think use a simple word. Use simple words. Complicated words. If I am reading a story or a book and it has too much complicated words and I have to keep referring to the dictionary, it gets irritating for me. And I'm sure it must be getting irritated for every reader. So be a naturalist. Don't try to use words, fancy words, flowery words again. Use very natural words. Slowly, with your reading abilities, you will discover new words which set into that line. Are you getting me? Am I clear about that part?
Vivan, does it make sense to you?
It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Suppose you read something nice somewhere and you like a word that the author has used, or maybe even on a billboard, on a newspaper, anywhere, and you're like, oh my God, this word is so nice. So that word, then you automatically use in your story. You know the meaning of it so well, it just fits in there. So you've not beautified the word, but you've used it where it's supposed to be used.
Sarthi, I always say that sense it before you use it.
Right.
If you can't sense it, if you've not felt it, if you've not used that word on your own self a couple of times, don't try and write it. It'll never have the impact.
Yep.
So I completely agree. And this is something, even my pro mentors, the mentors who've been helping these children, they say that this age is so vulnerable that they want to show their suddenly developed vocabulary skills. And I think a part of the Indian curriculum or the part of the curriculum we belong to, unfortunately, encourages it.
Yeah.
So they will sooner than later, as they move on to IB, they will realize that that doesn't work too well. So I have to agree that I think Vivan's story did justice to what honor code was, so literally that's all we read the old school. And I just told them, have a story based on honor code. So I do think his story justified the honor code and it brought it out. So Vivan, questions for Arti?
No questions. I'm very open to feedback. I I just had like one question on the document. If you go to the second page, 1 second. On the second, like the second paragraph, you've written but after mind in the comments. I don't understand what you're trying to say.
Okay, it's this you've written, they say a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind. So if you have just added, but Soumya's desk was empty and her mind was cluttered. So you would have connected both the things. Now what you've done is, your idea of expression is very nice. You've expressed both the things, but they are like points. If you would have added mind, but Soumya's desk, was not cluttered, it was a mind that was cluttered. So you would have weaved both of them together. Your idea was conveyed so beautifully, right? But if you again weaved it with the next sentence, it would have just connected so well. Did you get it?
Yes, ma'am, I get it.
Okay. Anything else?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Vivaan, do you understand the importance of doing that connector? Or you should ask her. So, because then Arti will explain to you why is it important.
Okay, I sort of understand it because, like Arti ma'am said, it's like points, and no one wants like points to be in their story.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying.
Okay. So suppose I'm saying Vivan is a bad boy. Okay. And then I say in the next line, he helped his grandmother. Okay. Now I'll state in the way what I want to say it. Vivan is a bad boy, but at home, Vivan does help his grandmother. Get it?
Yes,
so I'm
ma'am, I get
trying to say he's bad, but he does have good parts in him also. Okay. So I've connected the two. Sanjana, would you like to add something? I would love to hear your thoughts.
I completely agree with all of your feedback so far. I'm happy to share now or wait until you've given feedback to everyone and then.
Whatever you say,
That's
Priyanka,
it.
should she share now?
Arti, I didn't want you to have to waste your time, but up to you. You both decide what you all want. This is an
I'm
open
happy to hear
forum.
feedback. I can wait on.
Sanjana, jump on.
Yeah.
You
Okay,
give your
sure.
feedback on Vivan, but we'll have to go back to Arav's then at the
Yes,
end.
of course. Okay. So this was the honor code story, right? So let me see what I had for that. So yeah, I thought one of the first things that jumped out at me was how good your details are for this story, particularly when you're describing Soumya, right? So you have such specific things, the Fab India cotton kurta, the green breakfast smoothie. I think details like that, they're really contributing to creating a strong sense of character, right? I'm able to picture who you're talking about in my head. So I think all of those small details are really helping to bring the story together. They're helping to make me feel like I know this character. And as soon as you feel like you know a character, then you're able to care about that character. So I thought that was really well done. And then I agree with Arti that I think that the way you introduce on page 2, the economic stress, that's a really strong way to establish stakes. So thinking about sort of the technical components of a story a little bit, the most important ones I think are character, plot, stakes, climax, and resolution, right? You want a story to have all of those things so that it holds a reader's attention all the way through. And I feel like your story did a really good job of having strong stakes. I understand what Arti's crisis or what Soumya's crisis is, and I understand why she's feeling the stress that she does, and I understand that she's going to do whatever she has to do to solve this economic crisis, which then puts her into a moral crisis, right? So I think the way that you have these stresses leading into each other is done really effectively.
So Sanjana, I have a question. Does the stake therefore mean, I mean, in a way, you kind of like the person even when the person is going to do something wrong, because you kind of understood the stakes behind her. You've kind of understood why she's going to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that makes a story more effective. Obviously, that's only if the author wants you to like that character, right? In this case, I think the impression that I got was that Vivan does want me to like this character and does want me to care about this character, right? Because that makes the ending of the story that much more effective. If I didn't like Soumya and I didn't care about Soumya, then I wouldn't really care about the fact that everything has crumbled around her by the end of the story, right? But I do like her and I do care about her, which means that the ending is really emotional and effective. Does that make sense? Yeah, so what else? Let's see. Yeah, I thought that the build up continued to be good, and I thought that the climax was good and the resolution was good. I particularly liked that you have sort of a bittersweet, unfair ending, right? The way that the story ends isn't really fair because Soumya is the one who has to deal with all the consequences on her own, even though Sam was the one who pushed her into breaking her moral code in the first place, right? So it's not a perfect ending. It's unfair, but I feel like that's reflective of the way that things turn out in real life sometimes. So I thought that was really good to have a grasp of that in the 8th grade is amazing. I think for me, the only questions that I had for the story were that I would love to know a little bit more about each of these characters' backgrounds. I think the story is so tight and so focused on this one incident and Soumya's work life that I think it would be nice to get to know a little bit more about her background and a little bit more about her friends and family, not too much because we don't want to distract from the focus of the story. But I think knowing a little bit more about her would help make her even more sympathetic, which would make the ending even more effective.
So I think
Okay.
exactly what you said, Arti, the layers of the story. I think that's what she mentioned even to Arav, that, I mean, of course, they're grade 8, but that is very important, is that little bit of those layers hidden behind the layers sometimes actually makes the top layer a little more important. So I think, yes,
Yeah,
I think all of their
absolutely.
stories misses those layers, Arti, which you very frankly, I think very well pointed out. So, Vivan, questions for Sanjana?
No, not really questions. As I said, I'm very open to feedback, and I'll take your feedback. I have notes also, and I'll use this in the next story that I write.
So, a couple of things that the children, I really like the way Sanjana pointed out the essence of a story. So, Arti, as an author, brought out to you a very important point. Before you even start your story, you need to know the audience of your story. And based on that, you need to build on all the points that Sanjana mentioned. Sanjana, would you be able to mention it slowly again once so that the
Yeah.
children can write it down?
Yes, of course. So let's go over each of them. The first is character, right? Now, we've talked about character in this story and how all the details help to create that, how, as an author, you get to control how the reader feels about a character in your story. You get to make them likable or not likable. And you should employ that when you're trying to write, the hero of your story or the villain of your story. So you want your readers to be invested in your character, because if they can't care about any of the characters in your story, then they won't be compelled to finish reading your story, right? So character is really important. Then you have plot, right? Plot is just what happens in the story. What is the conflict of the story? What does your character want? What's stopping them from getting it? And what happens in the end? So plot is what pushes the story forward. Plot is what actually happens in the story. Then you have stakes. So we talked about stakes a little bit already, but stakes um, can be like this, which is something very concrete, which is that you're having money troubles. Stakes can be emotional and less concrete. They can be love, for example, like if someone is in love with someone else and trying to figure out how to tell them. That's emotional stakes, right? So there's different kinds of stakes, but essentially stakes tell you why your character cares about something and why you should then care about it too. Does that make sense? And then you have climax. Climax, if you're looking at plot as an arc, which starts here and then goes like this and then goes like this, climax is that top point of the story. So that's where everything all of the heightened emotions come together. right? That's the part of the story where everything is falling apart. And then resolution is after that, when everything somehow comes together again. So you want to make sure that your climax is satisfying, that it feels like it's been built up to appropriately. And then you want to make sure that the resolution makes sense, that it follows the climax in a logical way. Then you have the last thing that I think is important when you're writing a story is just thinking about what's different on this day for my characters. Why am I writing the story about this specific day? What happens on this day that makes it different than all the other days? And I think that helps you come up with plot, that helps you figure out your character's stakes, that helps you really figure out why you're writing the story at this moment in time. And then I think the last thing I'll mention is pacing. Pace is really important for a story as well. You want to make sure that everything is moving in terms of time. When you want it to be moving quickly, the pace should be faster. When you want it to be slowed down, the pace should be slower. And the way you do that is that if you want a slower pace, you have less action, you have more gaps in the paragraphs, maybe. You have more description. More description means pace slows down. If you want a quicker pace, then you have more action, more dialogue, things move quickly. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. Do we want to move to the next student? Arti, you want to pick? Arti, you're muted.
Okay, Nirvan. Have we not done a wolf in a sheep's clothing? Yeah, who's Nirvan? Hi, Nirvan. Okay, did you get my comment?
Can we do a scandalous disaster instead?
Okay, 1 minute. Let me see. I don't have that. Do I? Okay, yep. The honor code one? Okay. Okay, the thing one. Okay. Yep, okay. So your idea is good. Again, right? Nice story, I think I've mentioned at the end.
I realized that I had forgotten to, I had made some silly mistakes in the book. Like in one line, I wrote, for lunch, I defrosted some macaroni and cheese and sat for lunch.
That's okay. Those things will come. I really want to touch on this thing called show and don't tell. Okay, I think I've mentioned, is it your story I've mentioned? Please ask me.
Yeah.
Okay, so overall, let me just give you gist. Your story is good. It's interesting. And again, we need to know the targeted audience before we start. Now, show and tell is for everyone, okay? So have you ever worked on this part of show and don't tell in your classes?
It's my favorite. So throughout the book club, this is something that I've beaten down their throats with a hammer and nails. So yes, unfortunately, they've heard this very often, but.
Okay, so can you tell me something about this, Nirvan? What do you think? What's the difference between?
Show, don't tell, basically, like for example, if you're saying, if you're saying it was very cold, instead you should show how it was very cold.
Yes, exactly. So telling feels more like a lecture.
Yeah.
Right? And showing is the book. It's like, the book is not there to teach you. It's not there to lecture you, but it's showing there to explore, explore a story. Showing is when you're exploring that story and you're liking every bit of it. As I mentioned in your comments that you've said it's very cold, and I've even written a few lines like, I wish you had said something like, my hands were freezing. The warm cup of Bonvita I made had already frozen. I dreaded getting my hands out of my pocket. So I've conveyed, I'm feeling, and it was very cold through a cup of Bonvita. Okay. So I think it's very important in everyone's story. It's a craft that you're going to learn with time. It doesn't come easily, that I told you today and it'll come in your next story. But it's going to take years and years. Good authors also, when they write, they just tell, they miss that part. sometimes editors have to keep, sending notes to authors and say, no, you're telling, you're not showing, you're telling, you're not showing. So, you kids are like really small. So I thought I'll just give you a small example here again. Let's suppose I want to show that Nirvan is intelligent, okay? And I say Nirvan is an intelligent boy. What am I doing here? I'm telling everybody, right? That Nirvan is an intelligent boy. But the moment I say that Nirvan sat at his carpenter desk and carved out a beautiful wooden frame, and he, at the same time, his mom got his results of his exam or something, and he scored a 90. So I know that Nirvan's an intelligent boy, he's a hard worker, he's good with carpentry work. So 2-3 things I've shown together. But the moment I say Nirvan is an intelligent boy, full stop. But what kind of intelligence does he have? Where is he intelligent? In what way is he intelligent? You may be intelligent in carpentry. I may be intelligent in cooking. So that needs to be shown and not told. If I'm a good baker, then I'm going to show by saying that I make cake on everyone's birthday in school, instead of saying Arti was a good baker. So I think this was what was missing in most of the stories. And as I said, paragraph writing is missing. And some ideas, what I felt in your stories were conveyed. Like you said, something like, how would the day get even worse? More worse? How would it get more worse? But you haven't shown me what was worse earlier. Am I clear? I'm not sure if I'm able to convey my idea.
I think I understand, Arti, the backstory is not completely spelled out.
Yes.
And that's something I felt when I read Nirvan's story, that it could have had a fabulous future had we just known a little more of the past in it.
Yes.
So I think now there's a work to it, which I wasn't really aware of the stakes. I think the stakes haven't been spelled out very well here.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I realize that.
Yeah, that's it, Nirvan, from my end. I think you can ask me if you want to ask me something.
I don't really have any questions. I've understood everything.
On behalf of them, actually, I'd like to ask you, Arti and Sanjana, show don't tell is one of the critical issues that children will always face, whether it's academics, whether it's whether they take it on an elective writing, whether they take it for application writing. My life eventually boils down to those 650-word essays. Show don't tell is a huge problem. At this age, what would you recommend for them to kind of look back at their writing and understand this is a show and this is a tell?
I would like to say for that is the more they're going to read. So as a mentor, what you can do is you can show them 2 books, where the author is telling, and the same idea is shown by another author. They will actually recognize that. Once you recognize what is showing and telling, it just gets easier from my end. I think I would put it in a different way.
Sanj?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think show don't tell really is the biggest thing. I think no matter what you write, you're going to have to consider that. I'd say when you write a sentence or when you write a paragraph, if you read it back and it feels like narration to you, if you read it back and it feels like your speaker is just saying one thing after the other, then maybe reconsider that. I think the easiest way to show is to add detail, right? Provide description, provide imagery, allow us to feel like we are in the setting that you have created, allow us to feel like we are with the people in your story. So just reading a paragraph back and being like, do I feel like I can place myself here? Do I feel like I know this setting? That's a good indication of whether you've shown enough or whether you've done too much telling.
That's a good idea. So what I do to my children in an essay is, and children, I want you all to take away from this lesson to have these 2 amazing speakers here, is not just about writing a story. Maybe you don't want to be a writer, But even if you can change what you do in school essays, it'll help you. So one of the things I tell my children is take 2 highlighters. Take a pink one where you are saying something, take a yellow one where you think you've been able to show it, and see which one is more. Automatically, that itself is a game changer. So please work on what both are saying. And Arti, I definitely like your idea as well. So Sanjana, this is awesome. The word here is expressive or showing or illustrating. Basically, what I think we call imagery is very important. So, I'm definitely going to try and give them more examples, like Arti said as well, of different paragraphs so they understand it. So, perfect. Sanjana, your take on Nirvan's story, and you can choose to do the same story or the other one or both.
Yeah, I think a lot of the feedback I had for this story, Arti already covered. So I'll just quickly give my thoughts and then we can move forward. But I think again, the story had some really good details about character, particularly about the principal, right? You spend quite a bit of time describing the office itself, describing the principal, and I think that really helps us in this case, not necessarily to create the character of the principal, but it helps us to understand how your narrator thinks of the principal, right? So when you're providing details about a character, you're not just telling us factually that, oh, this is the character. You're telling us this is how the narrator thinks of this character, which is more interesting, I think. If the principal was the narrator, then and you were providing all of this stuff, details about the principal, then we'd be like, oh, this is factually what the principal is like. But in this case, your narrator is a student who's just done something wrong and who is worried about what's going to happen. And so the way that he's describing the principal shows us what emotions he's feeling right now and how he thinks about the principal, right? The principal is someone in authority, he's feeling afraid. So I thought all of those details were really good. I also think that you had a satisfying climax and a satisfying resolution. I think that my big question was again the stakes, which Priyanka Auntie and Arti already mentioned. I feel like if you heighten the stakes of the story, if we better understood why this exam is so important to the narrator, it would help everything else in the story feel heightened as well. So is this exam important because there's pressure from the narrator's parents to get a certain grade? Is it important because the narrator needs to get into a summer camp and the grade matters for that, or the college that they really want to get into? Maybe the narrator is an athlete, and if they don't get a certain grade, then they won't be allowed to play in their games, right? So if we really understand why the narrator wants this grade so badly that he's willing to cheat for it, then it would help us understand the narrator better and feel more empathy for him in all the events that follow.
Nirvan, any questions for Sanjana, Arti, any queries you have, you want to ask them about any part of your story? Just go ahead and ask.
Understood everything. And I will take on all those comments for the next story that I write.
Sanjana, what did you feel about the vacation story?
Nirvan, let me go to that. Okay, so that's the story about camp. Let's see. So I thought that the opening for that story was really strong. I think right away we know that something is off, right? We know that this is not a normal summer camp. Something is different. So I think that quickly sets up the question of why are you talking about this day? I think that it creates a sense of intrigue, and you build on that sense of intrigue really well throughout the story. You never sort of let the atmosphere drop, particularly the description of the overturned rafts and kayaks. I thought that was really eerie, and it made me feel very like, oh my God, what's happening? So I think that was really strong and really good. So you do a great job of building this strange atmosphere for this camp. I did feel that we moved too quickly from the climax of the story to the resolution of the story. So the climax of the story I'd identify as being the final day when they are having to cross the river with that harness and the girl falls, right? I think that's where the emotions of the story are at the highest point. That's when the danger is at the highest point. We're worried about their physical safety. We don't know what's going on. So I think that was, for me, the climax of the story.
Then
But
for
I
me,
think,
I think that's where it gets revealed that it's something else entirely.
yeah, exactly. That's where it's finally established that something really is wrong with the scam. That they're that this isn't a normal summer camp, that these kids aren't safe here. So I think that's a really strong moment. But if you look at the story, it moves to the resolution in the very same paragraph, right? So you have the climax and the resolution in the same space, which means the pace is too fast here. I think you need to allow for more space between the climax and the resolution. So you do that by slowing the pace down, adding some paragraph breaks, and I think also giving us more details about what happens like from that final day and going home. Are they allowed to just leave? Do they have to escape? Um, how can they how are they convinced to sign contracts at gunpoint? I mean,
I wrote no because I wrote that it's a prison, so they were forced to sign the contract because obviously held at gunpoint it's not.
right. I think that if you slow the pace down here a little bit, it would help to make the resolution feel more earned. And then I also think I would like to know a little bit more about the background of this camp, right? Who are these kids? Are they all in school together? Do they know each other before coming to this camp? Are they friends? How have their parents found this camp? And why are they sending their children here? Do the parents think it's a normal camp? Who sort of tricked them into this? And the people running the camp, what is their motivation in doing all this, right? Are they using the children as labor? Do they just want to scare them? I think knowing those details would help me understand the plot a little bit better.
So, the reason, in fact, Sanjana, I even asked you to get into the story is that because I felt that the same writer had two stories, one where the resolution was so clear, and
Yeah.
another where I almost thought that the climax was the resolution or the
Yeah,
resolution was the climax. And,
yeah,
sometimes we love doing that because we think it's anti-climax. But the truth is, an anti-climax is when you actually come to a resolution and you realize that it's different from what you are thinking.
yes,
Right. So,
absolutely.
I always think that children don't understand that. The climax, resolution, anti-climax are three different areas and they cannot be combined into one. So,
Yeah,
and backstory, definitely. Nirvan struggles with a backstory, as we can see. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping he's got that. But Arti, do you agree that this whole climax, anti-climax can become such a children tend to get confused also because in school we're not really taught how to see them differently, visualize them differently. It's a very movie taught, Netflix taught what we think is a climax or an anticlimax.
Yeah, I agree with Sanjana, absolutely. So while Sanjana was talking, that wave was going on in my mind. So before you start, when you start your story, if you have envisioned your story, just make a wave. I still do that, and I do that with every chapter. And in each chapter, I do break it down, each paragraph also, and I create the wave. So the
Wow.
wave, as Sanjana had said, you start off, you introduce your characters, you create your climax, you reach to the point. Now, don't slide down very fast. Don't come to the resolution very quickly. Slowly, the same way you've climbed up, you have to come down slowly, and then give your resolution. I think the wave solves it all.
Oh, that sounds so cool, which also means that the end, therefore, must connect with the next wave. So that's exactly what
Exactly.
transition is.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
Arav, more for you, beta. Did you understand that here? So now you'll know what they're saying when they speak about transition.
Mhm.
It's exactly where you end. You again have to take that slow, steep curve back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So,
in my story, where would this be missing? Like, where would this wave motion be missing?
good question. So, Arav, Sanjana, we're going to actually stagger this to you because you missed that Arti spoke about it. And one of the things she mentioned is that she felt that there was so we're talking about the honor code here, so that the transition between the paragraphs sometimes goes a little amiss. So if you could help him understand what is a transition and maybe even explain it in his own honor code story to him.
Yeah, definitely. I really enjoyed the honor code story. I think it was so exciting. I felt there was a propulsive quality to it, which meant that I wanted to keep reading, right? There was a real sense of stakes. In this case, there's physical danger. There's life or death situations. So I think it moves at a good pace. It moves quickly, but I think this kind of story needs to move quickly, right? I thought that the forward establishes characters really well in just the names and the quick description of them. I want to know more about them. So that was done really well. And I think starting chapter 1 with, the kachik and the dialogue, that's a great way to start a story. I think dialogue generally can be a good way to start and hook your readers if you're not sure how to show rather than tell. You can kind of like sneakily just do dialogue instead, and that helps start the story off on a good note. I think that for me, between the paragraphs, I think, let me see.
Children, again, hook is an opening hook and a closing hook, okay? How you start your story so that someone falls in love and wants to read is what we call a hook, okay? And somewhere a closing hook is something that kind of makes you relate back to where you started with the story, okay? So that's the word she used, in case you all didn't know. Sorry, Sanjana, I grabbed the mic for a moment.
No, that's important. I think that's important whether you're writing stories or application essays or even academic essays. I think you have to make your reader want to keep reading from the very first sentence. So I think, for example, when you look at chapter 2 and you look at the ending of the first paragraph and the beginning of the second paragraph, there is a little bit of disjointedness there, right? So the last line of the first paragraph is, he knew it was inevitable that he would have to spend the next 5 years of his life in a jail cell and didn't even make an attempt to say otherwise. And then you go to, Carlos Solrak lived in his cell. So I'm not quite sure if there's a time jump here that I'm supposed to be aware of, or if this is picking up at the very same moment that the previous paragraph ends on. So I think just allowing things to flow a little bit smoothly would help the story build on itself. Yeah, and then I think in this story as well, I was looking for more backstory. You actually give us backstory for Arthur, right? I think you say at some point that
I do.
Yeah, you say that his children died, and that's how he sort of like began on this life of crime. So we get a sense of what made Arthur into the person that he is. But I wanted to understand what made Carlos the person that he is, given that Carlos is our main character and is our narrator. Carlos is the character we're supposed to sympathize with, right? We want him to be okay. We want things to work out for him. So I wanted to better understand why did Carlos join the gang? How did he know them? How did he get pulled into this? What did his life look like before he joined the gang? What did he do? Did he have a family? I think all of those things would allow us to have a fuller sense of his life. And all of that will allow us to have more empathy for this character. What else? I think your ending was satisfying. I think, it wasn't a perfect ending. Things didn't turn out well for all of the characters. So I think it was bittersweet in a really good way. I did want to know a little bit more about Busher as well, right? I think the ending, the epilogue, and the final chapter, the way that it's structured, I think a lot of weight is on the moment where Busher sort of sacrifices himself for Carlos. And I think the moment works as is, but I think it could work even better if we know a little bit more about Busher and what Busher is giving up when he makes the sacrifice.
Would you almost, I don't know, in Arti and Sanjana, when I read Arav's story, I thought it was theater. It would be very good for a theatrical. I'm not sure if it's a great for, like a novel, but it almost could have been like a script. So somewhere that's a
Yeah.
probable reason why the backstory goes a little missing, because sometimes in theater that does happen.
Yeah. I think it could totally work as like a play or
It,
something.
exactly. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's exactly what I would have said, you know. And I do agree that Vivan's story had that entire wave, and it had waves after waves.
Right.
And so, you know, so that was a novel, yes. And I didn't tell the children that they had to write a specific genre. The only given task was, you now understand what honor code is. Tell us another story inspired. So
Yeah.
if it was a play, Arav, I really think that it works very fast. It's very fast paced, 1.5
Yeah.
hour. Everyone can go out saying, you know, that holding of the heart moment happens.
Yeah.
It definitely does. And I never thought Carlos was the one I had to be sympathetic to. So, you know, obviously
Okay.
everyone views it differently. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
I had one question. You mentioned there should be a hook in the beginning as well as in the end. So I also tried to use the dialogue Rotten Tomatoes in the beginning as well as in the end, in the conclusion. So would that be somewhat of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I did notice that. I think it's a good callback. And I think it's a good sort of way to express how these characters have shifted emotionally, right? In the beginning of the story, that word is being told to Carlos, um and he's meant to do something very terrible. And then at the end of the story, he's saying it to someone else, right? So he's kind
Yeah.
of reclaimed that term. So I think I definitely noticed that, and I think that works.
Yeah, I agree. That's what we would. So I don't want Z to fall off asleep on his poor chair. Z, are you alive? Are you with us? Okay. Arti, can we move on with, you can pick up a story of Z, and we'll continue this analysis because everyone's stories will have something which all of us can learn with. So Z, yeah, Arti, you're muted, love. Arti.
Yeah. So I just have one story of Zahan in the honor code one, I think. No.
Yeah.
Okay. So I really like the way he started out. Okay. I like what he said. The ringing in my ears was constant and made it impossible to concentrate. Very, very nice expression, Zahan. And then again, what Sanjana was saying, we need to know a little bit of background. Like, who is Orishiko Imakaniwa, right? I think it would have been great if we knew a little bit about him and why you want to kill him. Why does the character want to kill him? And again, I guess, as mentioned earlier, more paragraphs would just make it stronger, better, visually also better, and more relatable. Otherwise, it feels a little dreary, you know, such a long thing. If someone gets you to read, you know, it just gets, oh, like how you are feeling sleepy right now. So, a shorter paragraph just makes it interesting. Another thing I've mentioned is give a name to the school. You said you're in school. So, I think maybe a training camp or something like that would make it more specific as to where they are training. And I've also mentioned orientation and transition is needed. You know, orientation sometimes, you know, maybe you've written something in your fourth or fifth paragraph, but if you reread and reread your story, you know, maybe you'd want to put the fifth paragraph in the second paragraph, you know, just a little bit of orientation here and there also helps. It just makes a story more readable, and the author can relate, the reader can relate. Okay, I like the ending. It was unexpected and gave a thrill as you wanted to create. However, a scene needs to be created around it to believe it, to be believed. I think that's all from my end. Yeah, I liked everything else. Just layering more backstory would just work out great for the story. It's a nice story, short and sweet. Yeah. Okay, I think Sanjana can take over.
Yeah. So I agree. I think that there was so much intrigue in the story. Really, it just made you want to keep reading, right? I think for me that the things I was looking for, one of them was that I think that I felt to me like you've created a whole world here, right? You've done a lot of world building work here. There's a school and you've created an entire code for this school. And so it felt to me like you could expand on this world a bit more. Part of that, like Arti said, is background. I think it would be good to know what the school is, like who gets sent to the school. Do they choose to come here? Are they forced to be there? How old are these? How old are the students here? Um, all of those things I think would make this world feel more established. I think the other thing for me was that I wanted more descriptive language. Uh, you have some good descriptive language as you start off. You have dark lonely night, the street lights shining down, the ringing in the ears. Um, and then I think the descriptive language sort of falls away a little bit. And I think if you can have it be consistent all the way through, that would help with keeping keeping your readers feeling like they know where they are in the story, feeling like they're able to put themselves into the story. And then for me, lastly, I think a sense of time and stakes would help the story feel more tense and more dangerous, right? So we get some sense of stakes, right? There's the point system where if you have the most points, you become a captain. If you fail a mission as captain, you die. So we know that the stakes here are life and death. But I wanted to know more about these. I think stakes are stakes in general, right? They're stakes that every single person at the school faces. They all have these same stakes. So does your narrator have personal stakes as well? I think that's important to know. And then I think it's also important to know to get a feel of how time is passing here. You give us indicators, right? You give us the sun rising, you give us a few hours later, but I'm not able to feel the time passing from the story. So I think, like Arti said, just separating into smaller paragraphs is a quick and easy way to help the story slow down a little bit. And then I think because I don't quite understand the world of the school, I'm not quite sure what the consequences are of the ending of the story. So the ending doesn't hit quite as hard as you want it to. So I think in order for the ending to feel to have more gravity, I need to know more about Orishiko Imakaniwa. I need to know more about what kind of man this was, how much power he had. I need to know if I should be feeling bad for the students of the school, if I need to be sad about the explosion. And all of that I think will come from world building a little bit more and providing us more of a sense of personal stakes.
Before Zahan asks his questions, I'm going to come back to you, Arti and Sanjana. I think this is a tricky one where children start with a lot of excitement and then they start plateauing somewhere and then it's a straight line. And I almost feel that Zahan's a brilliant writer, great speaker. We've been seeing him over a few classes now, that I feel that he starts really in a hurry and then he either tires or just plateaus it out, and which happens with a lot of writers. So, going back to that weight, how do children get that into action? What happens when or how do you even know that you're going flat out now? What is the key alerts that we should be focusing on?
Yeah, I think that that's so normal. And I deal with that in my writing all the time. And I actually don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think just having the words on paper is a huge accomplishment, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with having a draft that isn't perfect, right? Your first draft isn't going to be your last draft. And so I think that it's fine to have a story that starts off strong and then sort of flattens. It just means you have to go back to it. You give yourself a break, you give yourself a week, you give yourself 2 weeks, and then when you're feeling like you're in a place to go back to it, you go back to it and revise, right? I think revision is as important in the writing process as actually writing. When I write a story, I think the story with the most drafts I have is 16. So that's a story that I've rewritten 16 different times, trying to get it to the place that it needs to be. That's maybe excessive. You hopefully will not have to write 16 drafts of any story ever. But I think that it's important to, once you write a first draft, to be like, to read it back and think about, is this the best version of this story? Or do I need to come back to it when I'm feeling refreshed? I think that for me would be the best way to tackle that.
Arti, what do you think? Are there any alerts that children can be careful about? Sometimes they don't even know that it's a plateaued out.
I like what Sanjana said, is keeping it away, for a bit. So when I write a story or a chapter, I keep it away.
Okay.
When you're rereading it constantly, you can't see this plateauing out. It's important to keep something away from you at least a week. So you look at it with fresh eyes. Like, in a daily life also, when you're constantly seeing something, your room, your book may be right here, but you can't see it. Like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? And you come back and you're like, oh yeah, I was right there. So I think I usually keep my stories away for a month. And then I come back and I can suddenly see, oh my God, there's so much missing here. There's so much missing there. So that excitement which you said, that Zahan's story starts at a peak and then it comes, just plateaus out. To just keep it away for a bit. And when you read it, for me, it's very important to feel excited and to feel connected to the end. Till the end, when I'm writing a story. So in case when I've written a chapter and I know that, no, it's not, I'm feeling so sleepy while reading it. So if I tell myself I am sleepy, what will happen to the reader? That means it's crap, cut it. Write another one, write something better. It has to be exciting for me till the end. Every word in that. So Zahan, I think it'd be a good idea to just keep it away from you, for yourself, and then just get back to it in a bit.
Zahan, your turn to ask questions now, bacha. And then we'll move on to your second story, but where are you, Zahan? Yeah, there. Questions,
Yeah.
queries for either of them.
So no real queries. I just wanted to overall, what could I do do I need to elevate my writing to a certain point? And if I do, then how do I do that?
Arti, would you like to address that first?
Yeah, sure. Zahan, your writing is very good. It started very well, and writing is something that you can't elevate it, as mentioned earlier, by better words. It can never happen like that. My concept of elevating your writing is by reading. The more you read, the better writer you're going to become. So don't focus on your writing, focus on your reading. Automatically you will write better. They are connected, they're just weaved together. You cannot separate writing and reading. You just can't separate them from each other. They will have, it has to happen together. So the more and more you're going to read what you like to read, right? As I mentioned earlier also, you will start envisioning your story at the back of your mind. And then you'll automatically become a better writer. So don't focus on your writing, focus on your reading. I think that's my way.
Yeah, my favorite words, read, write, write, write. There are lots of alliterations here, but yes, pretty much. It's worth thinking about. Sanjana, what do you feel, beta?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think being a reader is the best way to improve your writing. I think in terms of concrete steps for this story, I'd say I agree with Arti that, if this is something that you've been working on for a little while and you've been working on right up to this point, I think the best thing to do is to put it away for a little bit, come back to it with fresh eyes. And then once you're able to come back to it with fresh eyes, I'd say the things that I would focus on are world building and background and pacing. Those are the two things I think would really help make the story the best version of itself.
So with that, we've done one level of analysis for each one of you. There are lots of takeaways here. Backstory is very important. Layering is very important. Never forget the wave. So we'll always start with the first question: who are you writing for? Who's your audience? Then we're going to have the character, the plot, the stakes, the climax, and the resolution, and pacing, as Sanjana brought out. Then remember the wave flow that Arti spoke about, and how one wave must always continue with the other wave. One of the few things I'll tell you all for your academic writing is, when you all can't put it aside and you all need to complete it, remember what both of them said. Reread it, ask your questions. Am I sleeping? Is it seeming boring? Is it suddenly not making sense? Because then you know you kind of got to develop your backstory or your background a little more. Yeah. So Sanjana, I think, do you want to pick up any of their vacation stories? Because we pretty much picked on all their honor code stories. Any particular vacation story that you want to pick up, and then Arti can jump in if she
No,
has the time to talk about
I
it.
would just like to take leave now, I think. I'm
I
sorry.
get that, Arti. Absolutely all right.
I have another
I-
one coming up at 5:30.
No problem. You had mentioned that you've already sat through another 20 minutes. So Arti, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. Children, any of you want to give your thanks to Arti? Now's a good time.
Thank you so much. Your advice was really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I think your inputs were very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Rather enjoyed reading all your stories. You know, it was really nice. Again, when the stories poured in, I'm like, oh my God, they were so long. And perhaps I said just 1,000 words. But I was like, no, I'm liking them. Let me do all of them. So, yeah.
Yeah, so when she saw it, she said, look, can I do one per student? But it quite clearly seen that she did all, and she made her comments and sent it back to the children's ranch. So that was really funny. I was laughing. I was like, that makes sense to me. I would have, just given a couple of more, she would have probably done it. So Arti, we do have a little guest speaker here, Devansh, who was going to talk a little about his favorite story. So if you do have 3 minutes, then
Sure.
we'll just have him on. Devansh, you want to pick up one story that you really enjoyed and tell us what you like? Because you're the
Yes.
audience here.
Okay. So one of the stories I really enjoyed was the camp story. The one written by Nirvan Jain. I'm not sure what the title is, yeah. But there was a lot of detail in it, and how he described everything was very good. And he described it so well that I could visualize, and it felt like I was actually right there and everything was happening around me. The plot was built up very well, and my stomach was actually tied in knots the entire story. It was. But the bad thing was, I was reading it at night, and I'm not sure if it's real or not, but if it was real, it was kind of creeping me out. The whole, upturned canoes thing. I also liked how it was a little incomplete at the ending, so it would keep the reader intrigued. The plot is really good, so it's being built up, and suddenly a few mysteries like the canoes are still, they're left untouched, the mysteries. So it's still intriguing me a little to know what's going to happen if there is a sequel. I don't think there is going to be, but I still want to know what happened. And but my number one question is, was this real or not?
Nirvan, you want to address your audience?
Yeah, it was all fake. None of it was real.
Oh, thank God.
Some of it was based on real stuff. Some of it was based, but no, not that part.
So you
I
mean
think
I should have slept?
exactly what Sanjana said is that, the end, it doesn't seem to be a clear resolution. But if you hear from the audience side, the audience feels, oh, it might be a sequel. So, there are just so many different perspectives that we talk about here.
What I tried to. I wanted to make some sort of suspense, for a next sequel.
Exactly. So it's good to give that cliffhanger. But if this was not real, you mean I should have slept at night and not thought about if this was real or not?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean I would have had good dreams and not nightmares? No.
So thank you for that, Devansh. And thank you, Arti, for keeping that 2 minutes extra to hear a very entertaining audience here. So, Arti, I will happily ask you if you want to disconnect, you can. We will have Sanjana a little longer to do the vacation stories as well as the poems that their kids have written. So yes, thank you once again for taking out the time for us. It really means a lot to me, and I know it'll impact the children for a lifetime to come.
I'll be more happy with that part.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Priyanka. Bye-bye.
My pleasure entirely. Bye-bye.
It was really nice listening to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So that was incredible. And, I think what's very important for us to realize is that more than often, it's not about writers wanting to keep their ideas or stories to themselves. And one of the lessons here is collaboration. The more you collaborate, the more people reading your stories, telling you what they feel about it, the better your stories will become on a daily basis. So one very big takeaway I hope from the book club has been that I've constantly asked or brought collaborations for y'all. And that's very important to me. Sanjana, do you have a little more time to talk about some of their vacation stories and what you felt about those as well?
Yeah, of course. So I think I got 3 vacation stories in
Right.
total.
Right.
So I'm happy to go one by one. The first one on my list was Vivan's story. So maybe we can start with that. I thought that this was such a good description of all of the various places that you went to on this holiday, and such a good sense of how you felt about these places, what you did. I really enjoyed reading it. I was just in Milan a couple weeks ago, so this was a few days ago actually. So this was reminding me of that. I think for me, the biggest thing with this story is going back to a very foundational thing, more showing and less telling. Right? If you read this story, it feels like the narrator is sort of telling us one thing after another. And I think it would be really, really strong if you just took away some of that telling and gave us more little anecdotes, more little stories to make the same points. Yeah, I think that was the only thing I had to say for this.
Vivan, what do you feel?
I also feel like this wasn't my strongest story, and I also there were like many things I could improve on, and I'll take your feedback and I'll use it.
Yeah, of course. I think, there's so much here. It's so dense, the story, that there's really a lot you can do with it. I think, for example, when you talk about playing football, basketball, badminton, rock climbing, zip lining, rope courses, trampoline parks, mountain biking, water park, all of that is interesting. But I think if you wrote that and then picked one thing to focus on, right, and to tell a little story about, maybe when you went rock climbing, there was a moment where you almost slipped and almost fell, and you include that. Maybe when you were playing football, you can talk about like the final goal. So just picking the moments that were important to you within the story and telling us within the story smaller stories about them, I think will help.
A key difference you will realize as you move to further classes, Vivan, documenting and storytelling. And I think that's something Sanjana pointed out very vividly and clearly here this was like, things to do, kind of a chart. While what we would have probably liked it to be would be a personal blog where someone of your age, of your audience would say, I want to experience that. So that kind of deja vu feeling went missing a little bit. So perfect. Sanj, you can pick up the next story.
Yeah, so I think the next on my list was Niran's holiday story about camp, but we already covered that. So let me move to Arav's holiday story. Okay, so for this story, I thought that you had a really great opening, right? Just the first line, the mountains seem to move before my eyes, is such a strong first line. Right away, it pulls me into the immediate moment of what's happening in that moment.
Okay.
I think it was a strong opening, and I think the first paragraph sets up the stakes pretty well, right? It doesn't clearly establish them yet. It doesn't tell us that oh, something dangerous is happening, but it does provide some sense, and then that builds and develops into a full sense of stakes later. I think that you had some really lovely descriptions in this story as well. My favorite line was in chapter 2 when when the narrator is talking about his brother Jacob, and he says, his mouth stretches from ear to ear and his eyes glow like stars. I thought that was
Okay.
so lovely, and I think that really tells us how the narrator feels about his brother, right? Like, even if you didn't have that next line after, which is, I loved my brother, I would know just from your description that you love your brother. I think that's the power of a good description, right? Like Arti said, just flowery language is not enough to make a story better. But when a description like this is establishing something about character, or the way one character feels about another character, I think it's very powerful. So I really enjoyed that. Um, and then I think chapter 3 is where we get a clearer sense of the stakes, right? We know that this is a dangerous quest. We know that there's some mystery involved. And I also liked the mythology that you create here, and the strange dialogue of the frost giants, right? It makes them feel very vivid.
Mm-hmm.
I think I liked the conclusion that you come to, right? I like a happy ending. But I wonder if if it resolves too easily. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
the ending of chapter 4, it ends on such a grand note. What could one child do against the nation's military? It feels like you've set us up for something really big. And then chapter 5 sort of resolves things very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And so that feels like a little bit of a letdown. I think if we
Yeah.
can
Okay.
I think if we can have a more complex resolution before the happy ending, that would feel more satisfying. And then I think the other thing that I wanted more of is more about the mythology of the frost giants. I think that they seem really cool, and I want to know more about more about them, more about their desires, more about just more about them in general. I think that would
Get
help as
more
well.
character description and build up of the frost giants.
Yeah.
Because it's a very unusual pick. So when it's
Yeah.
something so unusual, your curiosity is heightened a lot more. And again, Sanjana, my question here is this what we could probably say is almost an anticlimax? Because you kind of know that this may not have the best ending. You're kind of preparing yourself by chapter 4. And in chapter 5, you're like, huh? No, that's not believable.
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit. I think pulling off an anticlimax is very difficult, right? Because you're setting your readers up to expect one thing, and then when they don't get that thing, they'll feel disappointed or let down. So I think it's
Okay.
possible to write an anticlimax, but I think it's very hard. And so I think that
I
maybe
should
working
stick
on
to
it a little bit
maybe.
more. I think if you're committed to the anticlimax, that's fine. But I think then, you revise and you revise, and in between your revisions, you have different readers read it and see how they feel about the ending. And maybe you'll come to a point where the anticlimax works and they say, oh, this surprised me and I really liked it. Right? But it's a process of revision then.
So I have a funny question for you since we've come to all the end of the story, Sanjana. And I always say this I was telling Arti as well. I always like to know at the end of reading a story, we all do this, right? When we read a story, we read the author's soul, but when we analyze it, we give it our soul. So
Yeah.
without knowing these children, when you read their stories, in a few words, what would you have felt about the personality or the student or the writer? So we'll start in order. Let's go opposite order. Actually, let's start with Z. What did you feel about Z's one story, unfortunately? But if you had a takeaway of the few words after that story, what would it be?
I think,
Sorry, Z stands for Zahan.
yes. I think I think I think I felt like this was someone who, to me, this story read like an action movie, right? So to me, this was someone who enjoys that kind of like fast-paced action, who's like who maybe enjoys video games and watching like spy movies and stuff like that. Because that was the impression I got from the story. Is that
Z,
right?
Z, agree, disagree?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think he agrees. I do feel so. Perfect. Let's
Okay.
move to Vivan.
All right. Let me see. So let me pull up stories again. So I'm
Yeah.
okay. So I'd say based on this, um, it feels to me like a lot of the story, a lot of the honor code story was so technical and so detailed that to me, um someone who's up to date with like news and current events and invested in facts, because I think even though the honor code story is fiction, I think there was a real commitment to truth and facts in that story.
I couldn't have agreed with you more, Sanjana. I have to say that was the exact reaction I had. And Vivan, do you agree or disagree?
Mostly agree. Yeah, mostly agree.
He definitely has a sense of factualities, is what I felt as well. So
Yeah.
yes, and Nirvan.
Okay. So Nirvan had the camp story, and the story about the cheating. This was really interesting because I feel like the stories are on two different planes here, where the camp story is really sort of wild and out there, and then the cheating story is very, very something that could actually happen, you know?
I tried to make it a little more relatable.
Yeah, so I feel like just someone whose mind and imagination is expansive, right? You're able to push forward into into territory that's, you know, supernatural and scary um and dark, and then also pull back to simpler moral issues and make both of them sort of relatable.
So in other words, and that I must say that is what compels an author to become an author. You wrote two stories with two totally different personalities, and that's not easy.
Yeah,
So I have to
absolutely.
say, Nirvan, well done for that. And then Arav, A.
Yes. So we have the story about the hit and run and the group of thieves, and then we have the frost giant. So in this case, I felt like the stories, um they're both expansive in different ways, right? They both reach towards the imagination. They both sort of move beyond what could happen in the ordinary day to day. And so I really enjoy both of them. And I'd say you're someone who is looking for extraordinary things and is looking to push your imagination forward and enjoys fiction over nonfiction and likes, sci-fi and fantasy and things like that.
Do you feel in some ways, Sanjana, he has the ability to take something really simple, a rock, and make it into something completely, extraordinarily different? I mean,
Yeah,
I feel that with both his stories.
yeah, I agree entirely.
Yeah. So,
I think
it's just
that's
Arav, you must develop your backstory, get those layers in place. It's very interesting. So with both of you, your personalities didn't really reflect in your stories. You'll allow the author's personality to reflect. So that's great. All in all, fabulous stories for everyone. Devansh, is there any other story that you want to talk about? Else we'll have Sanjana move on to the poems and give a couple of words for each of them as well.
There is another story, in fact, the Frost Giant one. That was a really good story because we spoke about how, a lot of authors get excited and then they just plateau, right? I have seen this happen with me even when I'm, let's say, writing and I use different vocabulary and describe things. At the starting, I go like all out describing a lot of things, and then in the middle, I just get bored of my own story. But in this, there was detail everywhere. I could visualize everything. There was figures of speech and comparisons and so many descriptions. Every single person was detailed to the last skin cell. So it really gave me the feeling I was there seeing the person, and it enhanced the story itself. And you could see the qualities and personality of the character, which I mean, I could see in the other stories as well, but it was really prominent in this one.
Thank you so much, Devansh. And Sanjana, you don't have to do each and every poetry analysis, but you can probably pick up 1 or 2 paragraphs that you really liked and how these children or the pro mentors could have added assessment to it. So you can just pick up those.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my favorite lines, my favorite 2 lines were, she dons her scarf, she dons her balding fur, she takes her time till time at last takes her. So I really enjoyed those lines, and I think reading them out loud, the rhyme works, and I find generally that when anyone writes poetry or is starting to write poetry, you think that you have to be talking about really grand emotions and ideas. And in fact, I think poems are much stronger when they have specificity. And of course, that's the same for stories as well, right? A story is strong when you have specific details, but I think it's equally true for poetry. And so I really liked starting with those 2 lines because they start on a small image, and then sort of expand outwards. So I think that was really great.
I don't remember who wrote them, Sanj. Is it written there?
And these were part of the poem lines which were already written in the book. This was like
Right.
the prompt we were given.
Okay.
This is the original. Nina, did you tell her which were the next set of lines written? So that's the original. I think that's one part of the Robert Frost series that we were talking about.
Oh, lovely.
So
Okay.
it's easy to fall in love with Frost. Sanjana,
Of
that's what you
course.
did.
So I think then then I'm assuming that the red is what was written by the students.
I think so, yes.
Okay,
The
so
black, sorry, Sanjana, the black one is the incomplete part and the red one is continuation.
So the black is the original.
got it. Okay. So I think from the red, I think one thing that everyone seemed to do very well is keep consistent to the tone of the original. And I think that's a hard thing to do, right? You're not the same person writing the poem, you're a different person. So managing to keep to that style and that tone is really impressive. So for example, the first one on the document is completed by Rishi Verma, who I don't know if Rishi's
He's
here.
a student mentor. Yeah, he's
Okay.
actually going to be applying to college, and I was telling him that he's a brilliant poem writer.
Yeah. So I think that that really keeps to the tone of those first 6 lines. It manages to stay consistent. I think if there hadn't been a black and a red delineation, I could have read the whole thing as one poem and felt like it was one cohesive poem. So I think that's a real skill to be able to do. I think that there's the She Donned Her Scarf lines. There's one completion by Anika Karan. And I think for that one, I felt like it maybe doesn't keep to the tone quite as well. It switches perspective for one thing, right? Those first 2 lines are in third person perspective, and it's she, and then when she switches to completing the poem, it switches to second person, and it starts with you. So I think generally a shift in perspective like that is jarring and is hard to keep feeling consistent. And then the final line of her completion has both second person and third person. So I think generally it's difficult to pull off so many perspective shifts in such a compact space. So I think keeping that in mind when you're writing anything really is making your POV consistent. And if you're switching POVs, having that be a conscious choice you're making with a reason behind it is always a good thing. And then, sorry.
No, absolutely. Very valid point. And children,
Yeah.
before we end, any questions you'll have for Sanjana, academically in writing, for stories, for poems, for any suggestions, now's a good time to ask her your questions. Anyone? Okay. Generally, the first person is the one who's the most shy, Sanjana, unfortunately. So I struggle with making them be the first one.
I understand. I TA, so I struggle with that too.
Sure, children, nothing else. You're not going to meet Sanjana again. She's leaving for US, and then she's not going to take out the luxury of this kind of time to spend with you all. Anyone? We do have a parent. Parent, do you have a question? I think, Priyanka, you're the only parent here now.
No, it's just been a fantastic feedback session. It's just so insightful. And this is frankly really the first time I've ever analyzed a book or a story written by anybody to such an extent and so extensively. And there are lots of facets to a story writing, which I never thought they were there. We just, if I've had to write a story, I've just written it without much thought to it. But it's great to know these skills and these pointers to keep in mind while you're writing the story. And it really helps. And I think what these kids probably missed out really on was not rewriting or going back to their story. And I think they didn't do that. They just put in that a few hours that were required to write that story. Maybe they spread it over a couple of days, but they didn't go back to their initial part of writing and then rewrite it. So that's just something, a very important thing that they need to do that. If you're writing like a 2,000 words essay, you just need to put in that time and effort. But it's just been a great session, really, really insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I really wish they'd done more out of it, but yeah, I mean, the fact that if they go back and put in their suggestions into it and rewrite the story, that'll be great. That will just reiterate, and they'll remember everything that was as suggestions that were given to them.
Oh, it always happens, Priyanka. Don't worry. Any kind of learning is sponge absorbed. I can tell you that. But Sanjana, I know you've got to go. You have very few days left here with your 25 cats. And believe me, children, she literally has a new cat joining her family every day. When I walk to her house, I say it's the most entertaining because there are cats and dogs and birds and chiku trees and now a carpenter joining with lights and fans, but that's another story to tell on some other day. And with that, Sanjana, thank you so much. You really actually taught me a lot. I love this whole story of how you explain the very topics of looking at writing, and I really appreciate that. And I'll let you go back to your cats now. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was amazing, and I so enjoyed all of your stories.
So children, again, now's a good time to say your byes and whatever you all felt.
Say hi to your cats for me.
I will. Cats. Well, if anyone wants
45 of them in my building.
If you want a 46, let me know. We're looking to adopt a kitten now. So
oh, has she recovered? The last one on the leg, the chicken soup for the soul, has she recovered?
Slowly. She ate for the first time yesterday. So we're making progress.
Achievement there. If she's not writing, she'd be taking care of cats. So thank you, Sanjana. It was amazing having you. And as usual for me, you're my 3-year-old. So I'm very, very proud of you.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And Devansh, thank you so much for being a guest reader. I know you have your exams and you took out time. That means a lot as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I really enjoyed reading all your stories. Bye.
Bye-bye. And with that, children, I actually now come to the end of the book club. It was fantastic. I think at the end of every book club, I will always say that I feel I end up learning a lot more than what I can ever share with you, children. But remember, you all have met 4 fabulous authors, guest people. You've met 4 different students. You've met me. You've met so many different perspectives. Remember, it's perspectives and diversity that brings great stories. So read a lot more and always analyze, okay? Remember a lot of things that you've learned, the imagery, the building, the tone, the plot, the backstory, okay? And show, don't tell. And with that, I will not tell you all bye, but I will show you that I'll always be a part of your lives. So thank you and bye-bye. Thank you, Ninad, as always,
you.
for being such a great organizer. Thank you, Priyanka, for being an incredible parent to actually have set this whole thing up.
Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful experience. Thank you, Ninad. It's been wonderful. Thanks for all the coordination and follow up with the kids that you've had to do towards the end of this whole session.
Most welcome.
Yeah.
He's used to it.
Oh, okay.
All right, children.
Yeah,
Be
great.
safe, be happy, and try and see a story in everything y'all do. Okay, each one of y'all have a phenomenal writing ability. Don't let it die. Okay. And remember the 40-second video testimonial whenever you get the time.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you.